Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today's conversation is a tough one. You're going to meet a wonderful mom named Erin, who lost her teenage daughter, Emily, to suicide in January of 2021. Emily was viciously bullied and cyberbullied, and this did not stop after her death. This story is tragic. It's difficult to hear. Please listen with caution, but please listen. It is extremely important that parents understand what the anonymity of online platforms and what social media is doing to our kids and our teens. This is a story of a complete failure of humanity, a complete failure of the social media platforms to provide safe spaces for our children to connect, and we cannot continue like this. Before we get into my conversation with Erin, I wanted to share that this episode is sponsored by Bark Technologies, which is a parental controls company for parents who are looking to protect their children from online harms like cyberbullying, like drug content, like sextortion, any of the threats that I talk about on this podcast. Parents like me are so grateful that we have resources like Bark to help make our kids' online experiences safer. On to my conversation with Erin. And thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really grateful that we got connected and that you reached out. You guys, you and a bunch of other parents were in DC recently when COSA passed in the Senate, right? And I was really bummed to be able to not join you guys, but I was celebrating virtually with you all. How was that experience for you?
It was amazing. It was sitting in the gallery and listening. I'm going to get emotional. Listening to all of the yeses it'll never be worth it, but it makes it more, palatable that I'm able to help pass something so important by sharing my story and going and talking on, to senators and congressmen and being on the Hill and talking to people about, Emily's story and how important it is that we get a handle, because everything is out of control right now with technology. And we need to get a handle on it because kids are dying daily. More than one kid is dying daily. That rate is way too high to be losing kids because we are afraid of tech companies and regulating them and letting them know that, listen, you can't put profits over humans. We're humans. I lost my child because of tech and what how it played into her story.
Yeah. And that's what I want to hear about today. First, we're going to get to know Emily, and then I want to hear her story. But before we do, maybe just a thought from you on why is it so important that bills like COSA pass, and what are you seeing as the biggest failures in how technology is allowing these harms to happen to kids?
It's so important because I think that everything is, like I said, it has gotten so out of control. Kids have access to anything and everything on the internet, on social media.
And everything has access to them. Anyone has access to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And the access, right, exactly. The access is goes right back to them. And, we don't take our kids into a bar, because it's not appropriate for them.
Right.
Why are we, why are we giving them these devices that are giving them access to the world and giving the world access to them? These are our most precious things on earth. Our jobs as parents are to raise productive, responsible humans who will be productive in society. And I don't see that happening anymore, to be quite honest with you.
It's really, truly The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt's new book, which is everyone should read. But I think a lot of parents are like, they're going to have to learn to use it at some point. They trust that the companies, if they say it's safe for 13-year-olds, that social media must be safe. And my whole goal is to make everyone aware that it is not safe. It is harmful. It is addictive. Exactly. They're not required to be safe. They're making money off of harming children, and children are dying from their experiences they're having or the connections that are being made through social media. And so let's get to, I really want to learn about Emily. And can you just talk about your daughter? What was she like? What were her hobbies? Just tell us about whatever you want to share about Emily.
So Emily was, she was the sweetest kid. She was my second born, and she had a really big personality. When she walked into a room, you knew she was there.
Yeah.
But she loved just as big as her personality. Like, if she liked you or she loved you, you knew it. I would always say she's attached, cut the cord, Em. She was like attached at my hip. She just was the sweetest. She loved animals and she loved nature. She was a nature kid. Like I said before, we're up at our lake house and this was her happy place. She would always say this was her true home. No matter where else she lived, if she was coming here, she was coming home. This was the place where she could be herself. She would get up in the morning. She was an early riser. She'd be out by 7 o'clock in the morning in flip-flops, shorts, and a tank top. And she would just run out and she would search for frogs and she would search for salamanders and she would search for turtles and she would come back with buckets full of
oh my gosh,
full of animals. I would always say we changed the ecosystem up here a little bit for a few years there. Like, I had to teach her what a humane release was. So, but she loved animals. She loved, she was a difficult kid. She had a hard time connecting with peers.
Okay.
So kids her own age it was harder for her to make those connections. But if you stuck her in a room with any adult, she didn't care if they were 20 or if they were 90. She could connect with them and she could make them her best friend by the end of their conversation.
How cute is that?
She was a great kid. She was, but she was a different kid. She was, she struggled with school. She had severe dyslexia. So school was really hard for her and was very frustrating for her. So those frustrations came out in behaviors, when she was younger. So she was a tough kid. Like if you were to ask any of her teachers, while they loved her one-on-one in a classroom setting, she was hard because she got really frustrated quick.
Yeah. Was the school pretty supportive in supporting that? I mean,
I had to fight a lot. So advocacy this is not my first role with advocacy.
Right. Oh God.
She was, I had to fight with the school a lot to get her the services that she needed and, programs set in place. And, I did actually end up having her put in a school that could help her cope with her learning issues. And then we brought her back to like the mainstream, our regular public school. Just because she needed to learn coping skills that she just couldn't learn while being so frustrated.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, she was a great kid. And, the world is missing out on an amazing, amazing person.
What was Emily's tech use like? Did she have a phone? Did she like to use social media? What was her interest in technology?
Emily was actually probably one of the different stories. Emily didn't really. She had a phone. She got it when she was in, I want to say 7th or 8th grade. So she was kind of like lagging behind a little bit in, from her peers as far as like being connected. On social media and technology use. So, but
was that hard for her? Did she like wish she was in those conversations?
No, actually, she was, like I said, she was like a nature kid. She'd rather go for a walk than play on a phone or, even play on the Xbox on the TV. She was always wanting to be out.
Yeah.
She liked that. Being able to just control her own environment and, take a walk and, listen to her music. She always had Beats headphones on. So yeah, she wasn't a huge technology kid. Honestly, it really wasn't until, the pandemic hit that she even got Instagram or Snapchat. Actually, I think she had Snapchat probably about a year before that because her sister moved to South Carolina. And so they would snap it. But that was like her only friend on Snapchat. She didn't use that as a form of communication. It was like she'd use the funny filters and she'd send a picture to her sister and her sister send one back. And so that was really like her only, like she really didn't connect that way. And then when the pandemic hit, she struggled a lot because it was really hard for her to learn online. because when you already have a learning disability and you had, supports in place, everything was taken away from her. Everything. There was no support.
Really?
No. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was literally like, here's your assignments, log on, and you have to have them done by midnight tonight.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was, obviously nobody was prepared for the kind of shutdown that we had, but they were really ill prepared because there was no support for her whatsoever.
How old was she at that time?
She was 16 and 17.
Okay. So what did that year look like, 2020, for her regarding her peers?
That was a really tough year. Like I said, she struggled growing up. She was diagnosed as bipolar. She struggled with being isolated. Yeah. So she just had so many layers. There was so many layers of things that went wrong during the pandemic, like school shut down and everything was online. And she got so frustrated trying to learn online. And so it was at that point that she kind of said like, oh, can I get Instagram? And I was like, listen, what? At this point I'm thinking, what's it going to hurt? You know what I mean? Like, at least she's talking to somebody. You know what I mean? It's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
And so she was on Instagram and I guess she branched out a little bit on Snapchat. She used to be bullied when she was in school, just because she was like a different kid. She didn't care what anybody thought about her. She was like the kid who would come in with mismatched clothes because she didn't care what anybody thought about her.
Yeah. And that's so cool now. Like we all think we wish we could be like that.
Right. Yeah. And so, she got bullied a lot in school, but what I see, looking back now is as much as she was able to kind of just put up with the bullying in school, I was able to love her enough. And, our family was able to love her enough at night. We were the family that did, you sat down to dinner every night at a table. You know what I mean? Like everyone together, we had those kind of traditional values where we were able to, we'd play games, board games. And I was able to love her enough and my family was able to love her enough that, the next day she kind of was like, oh, it didn't matter. Whatever happened yesterday. And, we got her back. We were able to kind of keep her always at a status quo.
Yeah. That recovery time you can get away from regular bullying by going home and it's your safe space.
Right.
But I'm imagining with social media included, she was not able to escape it.
Yes. And so that's what happened is kids found her on, once she had her, created an Instagram account, kids found her and they would start, saying mean things and, terrible, like, oh, you're fat, you're ugly, why don't you cut off all, she had beautiful curly hair and, but she was like not the one that like really took care of it. So a lot of times it looked kind of a little crazy, unkind, not nice things they would pick on her about. And she would say something to me. I'd be like, oh, ignore him. And, and then they started getting a little bit more, why, you're so fat and, why can't, she had a job. She ended up having a job towards the end of the summer, beginning of her senior year. And she was working in Target at the cafe.
Yeah.
And one of the kids was like, oh, you're probably so fat because you eat all the pizza that's at the cafe. And it started to get mean things like that. And so finally I was just like, all right, block them, delete them. But they would always they would create a new account under a different name and they'd still be able to reach out to her. I started to try and report them. I mean, I was looking on Snapchat, there was somebody took a picture of her with the hairnet and, behind the counter at Target. And it was not a flattering picture, but it went, made its rounds through Snapchat and just, terrible. Kids are terrible.
And they say, Snapchat says in their terms of service that they don't allow bullying and that, if you report it, that's what you should do. Report it.
If you could find me a number or an email back in 2021.
Yeah. Well,
2020 really
either. Yeah.
There was nowhere for me to report anything except for that. If you hold down on the picture, it says report. Okay. But report it. Happens. Where is it going?
Right.
You got no reply, no acknowledgement that you even reported anything. That was it. That was all. Yeah. That was the only tool that I had to try and help her navigate social media.
Did Emily feel like I should just delete it? This is not helpful to me, or was she?
Well, she was torn because it really was. The pandemic was still very real, and it was really one of the few contacts that she had with certain friends. That was how they communicated, was through Snap, through Instagram. And, we had a close enough relationship that I was able to say, like, what's going on. And she would tell me, and, I'd try and help her, like, all right, well, we're going to block this one. We're going to, these kids are they're way more savvy than I am, because I don't know that I could navigate half the stuff that they do.
Well, that's like vicious targeting, like the making new profiles to continue to torture somebody.
Yep. It's just a whole new level of bullying. And unfortunately, I couldn't outlove that, because, once you introduce those into your home, now you're just like sleeping with the enemy. You know what I mean? Like, they're literally, lock your doors all you want, but the enemy's inside the house.
Yeah. Wow. And it just sucks that we, in order to communicate with friends where they are, you have to give them access to somewhere where they're going to get bullied and see inappropriate content and become kind of dependent on the platform. Yeah. When all you want them to be able to do is connect with their friends in a positive way.
Exactly.
And why is this the only option?
Right.
So what happened next with them?
I mean, like I said, I had reported, I I never heard anything back. I looked everywhere. Search Google for an email or a phone number for Instagram or Snapchat. I will be surprised even now if you can find one. I searched high and low for a way to say, like, hey, we've got to do something about this. There was nothing. And, I just tried to help her navigate it as best I could. But these kids, they're just ruthless. And I think that it was, like I said, it was a layering effect, I think, between, being isolated and not being able to see your friends, and being home by yourself all the time. And then having to learn online when you've got a severe learning disability, and, that is the source of your frustration, and she already had a problem with trying to manage her emotions and frustrations. And then just layering on top of it, being treated poorly all the time, from the kids who would go to her work and like take pictures of her like that and then post them on social media. And then, just the kids who would reach out to her on social media and be mean to her. That, one night we were home and she just said it was like 10 to 9. And she was like, and it was supposed to snow that weekend. I had said to her when I had gotten home, I said, I said, do you have gas in your car? She's like, I don't know. And I said, make sure you have gas in your car, because it's supposed to be a big snowstorm this weekend, for, my husband's name's Joe. I said, for Joe to be able to clean your car off and move it out of the driveway and stuff. I said, you need to have gas in your car. She's like, oh, okay. So she's like, all right, I'm going to go get gas in my car. And I was like, well, I didn't mean you have to go now. Like, it's 10 to 9.
9 o'clock.
Yeah. And I said, and at this point she's 17. And I said, I can go with you tomorrow. And she's like, no, she's like, I'm going to go. She's like, I'm going to stop by her friend Tamer. I'm going to go stop by Tamer's house anyway. And say hi to him. I was like, okay. And I kind of like hesitated. I was a little bit annoyed that she was going out at 9 o'clock, but I always struggled with the fact that, at 17 years old, would I have let my very responsible older daughter, would I have let her out? Yeah, I would have let her go. So, I never wanted to treat Emily differently. So I, was like, all right, go, you got to be home. That car needs to be in our driveway at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
She's like, I know, and off she went, And, my husband and I settled down. I was in my pajamas and I'm settled down to watch a movie. And then that was about 10 to 9. And at 9:19, I got a text from her that all it said was, I love you. And I immediately texted back, I love you too. And I said, that's weird. Mm-hmm. Why would a 17-year-old who left the house 25 minutes ago text me that she loves me? And I was like, oh, and I was like, what is this kid up to? You know what I mean? Because you get frustrated and exasperated with teenagers. And I had a GPS on her car that she didn't know about, actually. Mm-hmm. So I pulled up the app and I look at where the car is, and we have a canal about maybe 2 miles from our house. To me, it looks like the car is in the water. Mm-hmm. And so, but you never. And
refreshing, that can't.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's got to be a glitch. And so I said to my husband, I said, "Can you pull up your bouncy app and see where Emily's car is?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he pulls it up, and he's like, I said, "Does yours look like it's in the water?" And he goes, "Yeah," and we literally just dropped everything and left. Mm-hmm. I started calling her, but she wasn't answering. Mm-hmm. So it was probably the longest 2-mile ride I've ever had to take in my life. Mm-hmm. My husband, and of course my husband, he's a firefighter, so he's a first responder. So, he's driving there, and me, I would have been doing 95 there the entire way. And he was like, no, he's like, and I kept saying, go faster, go faster, go faster. He's like, we can't help her if we can't get there.
Right.
So we get there, and there was a police officer already there. We go to pull over, and the police officer's waving us to keep going. And my husband stopped the car, and I showed them my app, and I said, listen, I just got a notification from my daughter that her car is in that water. Yeah. And she said, pull over. And so she said, we got a phone call that there was a car in the canal. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh God, it was literally 18 degrees that night. Oh God. And I'm there in my pajamas on the side of the road. Oh. And long story short, it took them over 2 hours to find her. Oh God. She had a black car, and it was like it's the darkest road. There's no lights. And so they had a hard time finding the car because it was completely submerged. Mm-hmm. So they had to call in helicopters to hover over the canal to locate the car. And then the dive team had to come and get her out. And, so long story short, they did find her, and they brought her to the hospital. So went to the hospital. She ended, they told me that she was gone, and it was just the craziest, I still can't believe that this is my reality. So she died, obviously drowned, and we're thinking it's a horrible accident. But it was, things were weird. There was weird things. Why did she text me? You know what I mean? She also texted her sister, I love you.
Same thing.
Same thing. Not a group text. They were separate texts. Mm-hmm. But we just treated it like an accident. It was just this horrible, horrific, tragic accident. Mm-hmm. But when the police pulled up her bouncy, it updates every, I guess, 3 seconds or something. And so they pulled up the history. And when they pulled up the history, they could see that she pulled up to the water. She waited for 1 minute and 11 seconds outside of the water, which is when we assumed that she was texting me and my daughter, and then she gunned it.
Okay.
So then, the police had to call me in. They're like, we think that this might have been suicide. And I was like, honestly, I agree with you. I had already kind of had that feeling, just because of how things had been progressing over the past year. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I agree with you. I think this was suicide. I think, I can remember walking into the hospital after they told me they had her in a room, and they said, you can go and take as much time as you need. I just remember walking in to the room and seeing her and just literally falling onto her and saying, you're not being tortured anymore. Like, she just looked peaceful. Oh. And that should never be a parent's first thought.
No, God.
And I just remember, I just was like, she's not being tortured anymore. Like, she's not, they can't touch her anymore. And, I spent 5 hours there and, till they finally had to kick me out of the hospital. And then we proceeded to make, funeral arrangements. Now, here's the the most twisted part of our story. Is because it was the pandemic. I was limited to 75 people who were allowed in the funeral home. I literally did wakes, for lack of a better word, in my driveway, in a tent with heaters, where people came with masks, and it was outside in my driveway for 2 days. And, the community was able to come and support us. But in the funeral home, we were allotted 4 hours with a limit of 75 people in the funeral home at one time, which wasn't enough even for just my immediate, my family, my close family.
How do you even do that?
For a 17-year-old. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, got our 75 people together. Everybody was there. And we decided we would live stream it so that her grandmothers couldn't even come. My mother was in a nursing home, so she wasn't allowed out at the time because it was the pandemic. And her other grandmother was in Costa Rica and wasn't allowed to come to the United States. Oh, whoa. So, yeah. So we live streamed it so people could see.
Yeah.
And pay their, final, respects. And we're new to this. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. We did a Zoom. Yeah. And my brother set it up and we had it live streaming. And, my daughter spoke. Emily's father spoke. I spoke. We had a couple other close family friends speak. But about halfway through, the funeral director comes in and he says, anyone who is on the live stream, you need to shut it down.
Pausing here to take a deep breath. Stories like this are difficult, but I truly believe that we need to surface the human experience behind the screen in order to make safer decisions in our own homes. If you are worried about cyberbullying, please consider using Bark. Bark uses advanced AI to scan text messages, social media, images, videos, and even audio for threats like cyberbullying and even child sexual abuse material. You can get an alert if your child is being cyberbullied. You can get an alert if something harmful comes into their feed. The Bark phone is the most customizable kids phone with text and social media monitoring built in, and it is literally the safest option for your child. But if you're going to go with an Android or an iPhone, please layer on the Bark app. It's high-tech parental monitoring. It scans their activities for harmful content. You can create screen time schedules, block certain websites and apps, and a ton more. Please click on the links in the episode description for more about Bark, but let's get back into my conversation with Erin.
I was like, that's weird. And he went over to my brother. He's like, shut that down.
Yeah.
And my brother's like, what? And he's like, shut it down. It's like, okay. So he shut it down. We kept getting, the funeral home kept getting phone calls because there was kids who had hacked the Zoom, took it over. They posted pornography. They posted pictures of corpses. They chanted, Emmy's dead, Emmy's dead. The bitch deserved to die. They threatened to blow up the funeral home and blow her casket and her body to ashes.
Oh my God.
And my entire family and community is watching this because while we stopped it, they somehow took over as the owner of the thing. So it continued.
Oh my God.
And so we had, either in the end, we had to stop the funeral, stop whatever. It just ruined it. It just ruined it. Kids are ruthless. They have, really, what were they accomplishing? She's dead. She's already dead. You guys already killed her.
There's no awareness of what dead means to them. Do they not understand a family, hundreds of people are suffering? and you're going to try to make it worse? Like, what are they thinking?
I have
Who
no
are
idea.
these kids? Please tell me you were able to identify them.
No, because these kids are smarter than us. So they buy VPNs or VPNs, I think it is. So what I gathered from the police was that they would buy VPNs through like Guam. So it was untraceable back to them. So when they signed in, the VPN that showed up is an address in Guam. And so there was only one child they were able to identify and get it back to someplace here. And because he was a minor, I can't discuss it.
Okay.
But they did catch, and I will tell you that he got nothing. Nothing. We went to court.
Not?
I read my victim impact statement while his mother scrolled on her phone, didn't even look at me. His father stared straight ahead. He stared straight ahead, never even looked at me. The judge said to me, "What do you want to happen?" I said, "This child needs help. The things that he said and did are so disturbing that he obviously needs some mental health help."
Yeah.
And I've always been a big proponent of mental health because Emily was bipolar and everything else. So that was more important to me than punishing him. Get him help. So they said, okay, we will get him counseling. They said, do you want to be involved? Yes, I would like to be involved. So then I follow up and they said, oh yeah, we took care of that. I was like, okay, but nobody let me know what was happening. Yeah, and they're like, oh, well, we took care of it. I said, well, what's the counselor's name? And I ended up calling the counselor. And I said to her, what happened with this case? And she said, if we asked him if he learned his lesson. And he said that he did. And so, he is rehabbed and that was his punishment.
Okay.
And I said to the counselor, I said, do you know what he did? She goes, yeah, something with a Zoom. I said, yeah. I said, my 17-year-old daughter died by suicide. I was like, and he hacked my Zoom and threatened to blow up the funeral home and blow up her body and casket to ashes. And she goes, oh my God. I said, yeah.
Yeah.
She goes, I didn't know that. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, so what did you counsel him on? She goes, well, I asked him if he learned. No, she did not know what he did. This is how defunct our system is.
Oh my God.
And because he's a minor, it's a closed case. There's nothing. It'll never show up anywhere. And he's done. That was it. He got a phone call. So he was not the only child that did it, but I could not find the other. There was at least 4 other children that were doing it.
We assume they're all about 16, 17, same age group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So these kids, they have no idea of the impact. And, I call them the, keyboard cowboys who they are behind the screen and they feel free to say whatever they want because they will never see the impact it has on the other side.
This is what anonymity on social media and gaming platforms does to our children, to their brains. Are you telling me that those boys, I'm assuming boys, are you telling me that they were healthy, their mental health was in place and they acted like this? No, the kids' brains are changed. The brain chemistry is changed when they're accessing violent games and bullying. They've probably been bullied because a lot of kids who bully have been bullied from when they were young. They don't understand what they're doing when they're torturing children.
Right.
And to take it so much further, like that is...
They have completely dehumanized their interactions.
Yeah.
They don't know that there is an actual human on the other side who is actually receiving what they're putting out there.
And there's no ramifications. They can get away with it. Away with unthinkable. Like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. And that they are all... And one kid got caught and tried in court and got away with acting like that with literally no repercussions.
No repercussions.
That's not okay.
No, it's not. And there's nothing I can do about it. Not a thing I can do about it.
I mean, Erin.
I mean, I am. I'm
right.
I'm trying to get COSA passed because this isn't okay.
And this is not a one-off situation. Obviously, this hacking thing is one-off, and hopefully will never happen to anyone ever again, or hasn't before. But what have you learned about how much this behavior is affecting kids all over the country or all over the world? Like, this is not a one-off situation.
Oh, no.
Millions
Every child is feeling the impacts of social media and being behind a screen. Number one, none of this new generation, they don't know how to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Have you ever tried to have a conversation with a 13 or 14-year-old right now? Mm-hmm. They do not know how to look you in the eye. They don't know how to respond to you. They look everywhere but at you because they are so uncomfortable with human interaction. And that's what social media and technology has done to them. Their brains, they don't want to make phone calls. Mm-hmm. These kids, they will say, like, call and order a pizza. No, I'll just order it online. No, call and order a pizza. Mm-hmm. You will have a fight from 99% of kids nowadays to actually call and order something to be delivered to their house. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they, and heaven forbid you should ask them to run in and pick something up, because they'd have to actually ask the guy behind the pizza counter for the pizza that they ordered.
I mean, these interactions face to face are so important for these kids. They have to learn it now because they're never going to be able to develop that later on.
I'm fully developed. Terrified for this generation. I'm terrified for the world 10 to 15 years from now. Yeah. Because none of these kids, these are going to be the kids who are running companies and running businesses and operating government, and they don't know how to communicate. Mm-hmm. So what is that going to look like?
Yeah. And we'll talk about solutions, but I want to know, like, what adjustments, because you have two younger boys. And so what adjustments are you making now after what you've learned about devices and social media access?
Well, I mean, we don't allow anything in their rooms at night.
Yeah. Right. Good. Yep.
Because it just keeps them up. And there's so many layers to this that, their mental health is affected because they're not getting enough sleep, but they're not sleeping because they're addicted to these devices, and, their brain's not developing correctly. Why? Because they're not getting enough sleep. That's when their brain develops the most, is when they're sleeping. Right. It's all a big vicious circle.
Yeah. And the bedroom thing is such a good reminder. Like, we cannot get them an alarm clock for their room, a stack of books. They don't, like a Kindle reader if they need that, something where they cannot access social media or addictive games or apps. I'm hoping that in 5 years, 10 years, it will be like illegal for a kid under a certain age to have a device in their bedroom. That is how harmful it is, right? Yes, right. Like, call Child Protective Services. This parent has a kid with a phone in their room.
It's not just the kids who are, I mean, the technology, yes, is addictive and the kids are getting addicted to it. Yeah. But the parents are also using it as a babysitter. Yeah. And that's not okay. Like, no. One of my biggest pet peeves is to sit down at dinner, go out to dinner and watch a family of 4, 2 kids, 2 adults, sit down, and the mother unpacks out of a diaper bag 2 iPads for a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Listen,
just because they want them to be quiet.
There's so many activities and games you can do and things.
Tic-tac-toe has not died.
Tic-tac-toe is alive and well.
Yes, it is.
I Spy is alive and well.
Exactly.
God, I don't know how to tackle that one, because I have this fantasy, and I've said this on another interview, but I have this fantasy of, if I see a family in a restaurant and they don't give their kids devices the whole time, and the kids are maybe fussy, but they don't do it. And then I'm going to go up to the table. I'm going to be like, that was so cool that you didn't give your kids a device. Like, I think that's so important. But I've never experienced it.
I would buy them dinner. I would buy them dinner, but I'm like you. I have never seen it. That's the first thing that gets unpacked. It's not even like you're using it as a pacifier anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is become the norm that they sit down, get them in their seat, hand them a device. Like the kid hasn't even had a chance to be rowdy yet.
Right. I know. Let them be a little creative for a second. But
exactly.
It's the way that we ingrain devices in them, in their system as babies and toddlers. It indicates how they will act with devices as teenagers and adults. So we're basically feeding them into addiction or guiding them into addiction by giving it to them and there's so many reasons. Look, like brain development, the babies need face-to-face interaction. Babies are experiencing like still face syndrome because they watch their parents like this, like look kind of a depressive state at their phone all the time. And the kids are mimicking that. And it's like, there's all these things that are very scary about that. And so,
it's terrifying.
Moving on, before we move on, like devices for young kids and babies and toddlers is no. But
that terrifies me. I just had my first grandson, and
congratulations!
Thank you. He's 4 months old, and I'm like, I keep saying to her, I was like, no iPad, kids, no iPad. Like, the kid will, as long as I am around, the kid will never have an iPad.
It's not helpful. There's nothing educational about it. Nothing.
Right.
And all it does is it lets them zone out using two senses, audio and visual. It cuts out everything else that they need to develop. And allows you to get something done. But the harm is so great. Okay. So what are you working on as a solution? Like, what are you advocating for to help parents keep our kids safe on their devices? So
I am an advocate for Kids Online Safety Act. I work with Fair Play, and I'm a member of Parents SOS, which is Parents for Safe Online Spaces. And we are literally just 20 families who have been horrifically, tragically impacted by the effects of social media, whether it's, harms of, blackout challenge or having access to fentanyl, cyberbullying. We literally share the worst day of our lives over and over and over again so that other parents don't have to have that experience. Because it is so important that we get legislation through, because listen, you're not going to put a kid in a car seat that hasn't been tested 15 million times with crash dummies in it. Right. So why do we give these kids these unregulated devices where they have access to anything and everything that's out there?
I think that parents who listen probably are pretty up to speed on COSA, because I've been trying to roll out, and I have more coming this month and next month, roll out more episodes about what is the Kids Online Safety Act. Why is it so necessary that there hasn't been any legislation passed since the 90s to protect kids online, and that there was a line in there, there's a section in there called Section 230 that actually provided a shield, a shield to the social media companies so that they are not liable, even when they serve content to our kids, even when things are reported to them and they don't take it down. Therefore, allowing the bullying to happen and instigating harmful situations. So, but what about COSA do you like? And we'll do breakdowns. I do breakdowns in other episodes, but what elements do you like that you think will help kids?
Giving parents a tool to be able to help their kids. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to help Emily as much as I would have liked to. I was an involved parent and I couldn't help them, so I can't, God bless the kids who don't have involved parents. Give the parents the tool, like make it as restrictive as possible under a certain age, and let the parents make the decision when their kids are mature enough. And then it's on the parents, let there needs to be a place where things are able to be reported. Not just a report button that goes nowhere. Let parents be involved. We're so quick to yell at a teacher because they, corrected our child on something in school. And, parents always get that their defense is up. Like, oh, what do you mean? That's not what, they try to defend their kid. Why aren't we trying to defend our kid against these social media companies? Why aren't we trying to defend our kids? I don't understand it.
I think because parents are also addicted to the platforms. And so for us to admit that it's unsafe for children, we have to have some understanding that it's actually unsafe for us as well.
Too.
It's more unsafe for kids, but we have to change our behavior, and that's uncomfortable for parents.
Yes.
So I think that's one. And I think two is that these big tech companies have so much money and so much influence, and they put out studies that say how great they are for kids, and they lobby and put out false narratives about bills that are supposed to keep our kids safe. And so they do so much to try to negate any false narrative or any true narrative about them that it can be confusing, I think, for parents.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents are still acting under the fact or the guise that like our kids need to be introduced to tech young. They're digital natives. They're going to be super learners if they know this tech from when they're young, which has like been proven to be false. So,
I know. I think it's dumbing them down. I don't think it's making them any smarter.
Oh, yeah. Please, listeners, look into my other episodes for more information on the Kids Online Safety Act. But what we need people to do now is
I have my shirt on that says Pass COSA.
Yes. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, hashtag Pass COSA. Yeah. Contact your representative in the House. If you don't know who it is, go to house.gov, put in your zip code, and you can figure out who it is. But just message them, tell them to pass COSA, tell them to co-sponsor COSA, tell them a personal story, whatever you want. But really speak to that it's important to you as a parent to have protections required by these companies. I want to touch one more time on like the bullies in these situations, because it's something that is hard to understand how a human being can act that way. Mm-hmm. And what would you say? What would you want to say if like the bullies were listening? If any bullies are listening to this conversation, what do you think is important for them to hear?
And I've been saying it since Emily died, is every word that you put out there has an impact on someone, whether it is the person that you're speaking to, the family behind that person that you're speaking to. Everything that you put out there has an impact. Do you really want your impact to be that somebody killed themselves because of you? Honestly, because that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened here.
100%.
So do you want to live with that for the rest of your life? Because I certainly don't. I go into schools and I do speak, to schools and churches, and, I will speak. And my message is always about kindness. Kindness doesn't cost anything. It is literally the easiest thing to do. And listen, I am not under the pretense that everyone is going to love everybody, that, this is not, I totally get it. People don't like each other.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you the right to go and be mean to them or to say nasty things about them. It literally takes more effort for you to go out of your way and put effort into being mean and thinking of mean things to say to that person than to just walk by them. Don't say anything.
Right.
Because had you said nothing, at least you're leaving a zero impact.
Right.
If you continue walking, you're leaving a zero impact. If you say, hey, nice shirt, now you have a positive impact. If you go, hey, you're a jerk, now you've got a negative impact. Like, keep it at zero impact or positive. Like, there's no reason for anybody to have a negative impact on somebody else. Because we all struggle. We're hard enough on ourselves. Every single person out there is hard enough on themselves. Trust me.
Right. And who wants to live with that? That's what you said about like, that's going to affect them. That's got to affect them. And when you talk about how teenagers don't like make eye contact and can't speak to people, it makes me think like, is there some shame there about how they are ashamed of how they act online?
How they're treating people.
Yeah, for sure. I bet there's something there, and that'll be something for like to talk to a therapist about, because shame is real for all parties. But Erin, I am so, so sorry that this happened to your family.
Thank you.
I am so in awe of you for speaking out. It's nothing short of heroic. I mean, all of you parents.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that you all have each other and that you've come together. And I think this is really the first, the last few years, before this last 2-3 years, there wasn't that support. And I'm so grateful that you guys have each other.
Yeah. We all were thrown into this club that nobody wants to be a part of. Right. But there's no other stronger, more heroic people that I would want to walk this path with than the other parents that I'm work with and advocate with, because they're amazing. Every one of our stories is different yet the same, because we all had the same outcome. And, as tragic as everyone's story is, those people are my heroes, that they stand up and they talk about what happened to their kid every day and share, because you know what? None of us want anyone to ever have. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And it happened to us.
Yeah.
And so we don't want that to happen to anybody else.
No. And identifying the commonalities. And the biggest commonality, after speaking with dozens of parents that have lost a child, is social media.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
Okay. And so we have to delay, we have to monitor, we have to have open conversations, and we all have to push on our government to require these companies to be safe.
Yep.
So, Erin, thank you so much for introducing us to Emily, your beautiful daughter.
Oh, thank you for
again
to us.
For sharing your story, of course. And let's stay in touch.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.